Welcome to election official training for the spring primary election to be held on February 16th. I'm Janice Moyer, Village Clerk Treasurer.
And I'm Amy Vanderhyde, Deputy Village Clerk.
We will be presenting training today. Election Day notes. Election officials may not wear political apparel or discuss candidates or politics while working. If this occurs, please report any concerns to the Chief Inspector. If you do not work at your specified polling location and you wish to vote, please make sure that you absentee vote either by contacting us at Clerk Services at Village Hall, coming in person between February 2nd and through February 12th, or request an absentee ballot by mail or online on or before February 11th at the MyVote.gov website, or we put a link to the form that you can use for a mail request on the village's website. Voters cannot be required to wear a face covering while voting, but a supply of face coverings will be available at each polling place so that if there is a voter who forgets their face covering and they would like to wear one, there would be one available for them. Election Day notes continued. Voters may need additional help getting to their correct polling places this election. And why would this happen? The answer is that in April, August, and November of 2020, elections were held at different polling locations because of COVID and for other reasons. Please provide help to these voters. We'll be supplying ward maps that can be used to determine a voter's correct polling place. Those are in the black cases. If able and the voter is registered to vote at their current location, the voter can use myvote.wi.gov to look up their polling place. A map with all polling places and the address will be provided to each polling place as a handout, and you can give those out to a voter so that they can locate their correct polling place. Clerk Services will also use social media and any other method available to make sure voters check their polling places before heading to the polls on Election Day. Personal protective equipment. We will be providing face masks or face coverings, protective face shields, hand sanitizer, gloves, and social distancing. We would ask that you follow those guidelines on Election Day. All election officials are required to wear a face covering over their nose and mouth while working at the polls on Election Day and at the central count location, which is at Village Hall this election. All election officials are urged to wash hands regularly, use hand sanitizer, and socially distance. The Chief Inspector or designee will ask each election official questions related to COVID-19 protocols when arriving at their polling place before the polls open on Election Day. Absentee drop-off. Voters cannot drop off their absentee ballots at polling places because we now process all absentee ballots at a central count location. Like I mentioned before, for this election, we are holding central count at Village Hall. But what do you do when a voter walks into the polls on Election Day and wants to drop off their absentee ballot? The answer is that you would need to direct the voter to go to Village Hall, and I've listed the address on Pilgrim Road. The drop box in front of the entrance to Village Hall will be open until 7 p.m. on Election Day. The counter at Clerk Services will be open to accept absentee ballots until 8 p.m. All absentee ballots must be received by 8 p.m. on Election Day in order to be counted.
Reviewing photo ID. This is for those who work at the poll tables. The election inspectors will view the photograph. It must reasonably resemble the elector, but keep in mind that appearances change. Along with during COVID, we do have face masks on. The voter is not required to remove their face mask. You can view and reasonably determine that it's them with their face mask on. Check the elector's name. The elector's name must conform to the name on their voter registration, but it does not have to be identical. This is where things such as Robert and Bob come into play. An expiration date. If the ID has an expiration date It must meet the expiration date requirements, which we will talk about later. Remember, the photo ID does not have to include the voter's current address. The voter's signature on the photo ID is not something to be comparing against their voter signature in the poll book. The next slide shows a picture view of all the photo IDs that are acceptable on election day. These are things such as the state-issued Wisconsin driver's license or ID, uniform service license, a passport or booklet, a Veterans Affairs card, university or technical college identification card, but they also have to have an additional proof of enrollment with that, a tribal ID card, certificate of naturalization, and Wisconsin driver's state ID or IDPP receipt. This next slide is a chart of all the photo identification. This is something that is new. So if you've ever had training with us before, the dates on this have changed. The types of IDs have not, but they're standards. So the new standard on these is to remember the date of 11/3 of 2020, the last general election. So I will not read all of these through, but I will state that such things as a Wisconsin driver's license, the very first one, it may be revoked or suspended, unexpired or expired after 11/3 of 2020. So please check all of your previous trainings and switch this document for any you may have. This next page is the free ID petition process. This is something we've had in the past. Make sure that if somebody does not have the correct ID, you are handing them this document. It is located with the Chief Inspector in the Chief Inspector binder. This next page is a sample poll list page. So on this page, you'll note things like the absentee issued, highlighted in yellow, and the absentee returned. So let's talk about those poll book notations. What do you do when the notation says absentee issued? Check the absentee ballot log, which is given to you within the poll book, to see the ballot return date is filled in. If it is, ask the voter if they have returned, if it isn't, ask the voter if they've returned their absentee ballot to clerk services, a drop-off box, or have put it in the mail to return it back. If the voter says yes to any of these three options, they are not allowed to vote again. If they say no, contact your chief inspector who can verify the ballot was not returned. What if the notation says absentee returned? The voter cannot vote again. Their absentee ballot was received by clerk services. If the voter feels that there is a discrepancy, check with your chief inspector. Do not just turn them away.
Next, we're going to talk about ERIC movers. So what is ERIC? It is Electronic Registration Information Center. The state of Wisconsin has an alliance or an agreement with this ERIC program, and what it's supposed to do is help keep our poll list clean. So let's go through the slide and you'll have a better understanding of how to manage this at the polls. The Wisconsin Election Commission, or WEC, is asking chief inspectors and poll workers to follow steps on election day when checking in a voter at the poll list table. And if you see the "Have you moved," which is encircled in red towards the bottom of the page. Why is this used? To identify voters who may have moved from their current address. There can be a couple different other things too. And what happens with ERIC is that a voter is kind of flagged when the ERIC system has seen that there is an updated address with the Wisconsin Division of Motor Vehicles. The elector or the voter has filed a national change of address with the U.S. Postal Service. They have registered to vote in another state, or they've obtained a driver license or registered a vehicle in another state. But another thing that can happen is there can just be a typo in the name of the voter. Maybe when they registered to vote, a letter was picked up wrong or it was a data entry thing. So it's a way to keep, like I said, the poll book clean. So if you can help, if you see, have you moved by the voter's name, you're going to be asking them if they have moved from their current address. And so we're going to go through the chart on the next page, which is going to give you a little bit of guidance on what to do. So if the voter says, yes, I still live at the address on the poll list, you're going to have the voter sign the poll list and continue the check-in process as normal. So they would be just normal registered voter voting. If they say no, oh yeah, I moved, I'm not at that address, then you need to advise the voter that they need to complete an election day registration form for their new address. Now that might be at a different polling place, or if they've moved to the neighboring community, might not be at your polling place, but give them some guidance. The last column, a typo in the address of the voter listed in the poll list. Note the address correction on the poll list. Do not write over the name or address of the voter, and then continue with the check-in process, and they get to vote. And then as part of our cleanup after the election, we go through all the poll books, we'll find that correction, and then we'll make that in the database so that their record is clean. Let's talk about ballot information. For this election, the only contest is the Superintendent of Public Instruction. All wards in the Village of Menomonee Falls have the same contest, no difference in contests between different wards. Just to note, please, that the color black is only on one side of the ballot, and that's in the endorsement area. For some reason, when the ballots were printed, typically there's a block on both sides, but that did not happen this time. So color black just on one side of the ballot. Couple notes on how things will show up in the express vote, which is that ADA machine. It's going to show a partisan contest message when scrolling through the screens. And for us, this is not a partisan election, but there were some other communities in Waukesha County that had partisan elections, and because of the way things are coded, the county could not eliminate that from our coding. So anyway, the voter could continue voting by pressing next when that message appears. There's no effect on how the voter's selection is recorded. Then with the DS200, the results tape will also show undervotes for party preference. Again, there's no place that they're going to be voting for a party preference, and it does not affect how their vote is counted, and just ignore that part. The next page actually has examples. The example on the left is actually the top of the express vote blank. If someone uses that machine, you can see where the red arrow is. It says choose a party in which to vote. It says no selection made. I said that would be the screen you would just go next and go to the actual contest where they can vote. And then the example on the right is a copy of the tape from the DS200. Again, you can see where it says on the top, it's a little faint, choose a party in which to vote. And you can see there's 14 undervotes. There's the major parties listed. That's because we are not voting partisan this time. So that's just gonna all show undervotes. If you have 200 votes cast for this particular ward, and this is not one of ours, but there would be 200 undervotes. So don't worry about that, not a problem. We know it's just the way it is this election because of the way the coding is done. So the next page is the DS200 ballot. You can see on the left, it's a little small, but that is the actual ballot. It's a little bit longer than this. We just clipped the part that you needed to see, and it shows there's 7 candidates for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. That is the only, excuse me, that is the only contest. On the right is the back side of the ballot. Again, endorsement areas where the color is going to show up, not on the other side, and that is no different than other elections. Overvoted ballots, we like to put this in our training just so that everybody's thinking again about overvotes. This is obviously from a 2016 election where there were only 2 candidates for this office. But it shows you what happens if there's an overvote. The screen on the computer or on the DS200 will show the actual contest where the overvote took place, and it says you chose 2 candidates and you're allowed 1. So in that case, the voter would need to get a clean ballot, and the original ballot would be spoiled so that they can make the correction. Initialing ballots. This is something I always like to keep also in the training. Please do not initial ballots before a voter has checked in at the poll list table. I know sometimes, especially with a slower election, and this will probably be one of those, kind of want to work ahead a little bit. And I get that, but there are reasons that you should not be initialing ballots. The Wisconsin Election Commission doesn't allow this practice. A live ballot stock could be left on tables if the polling place needed to be evacuated quickly. And if 2 ballots were given to the voter by mistake, the voter now has 2 live ballots in the voting booth and possibly could vote both ballots. So please do not initial ballots until the voter is in front of you and has provided, their documents, and they're kind of at the end of the process. The last thing you would do is initial those ballots before you would hand them to them so that they can vote. Ballots. End of the day ballot bagging. For this election, there's no requirement to bag ballots by ward. Ballots will be bagged by polling place. We've been doing that the last few elections. You may need to use multiple bags. Poll workers will need to look at bags for write-in votes before bagging, as usual. As of February 5th, there are no registered write-in candidates. Any party represented poll workers must sign the ballot bags, and the ballot bag seal numbers will be written on the inspector's statement. Curbside voting. If a voter is unable to enter the polling place, they are eligible for curbside voting. The voter can register to vote as well as vote using curbside voting. Chief inspectors direct the election officials on how to administer curbside voting. Just a couple notes. If you do have a curbside voter, an election inspector does have to announce that an elector has requested curbside voting in the polling place. The notification is done, and 2 election inspectors perform the task. All proof of residence and photo ID documents must stay with the voter. Please do not take them into the polling place. And again, the chief inspector will help with the detailed process so that we do it correctly.
Registration. So this we have used for the last election, and it's a nice little scenario-based chart. But voter registration must have lived at their current address in the village at least 28 days before the election. So this would be on or before January 19th of this year. If not, the voter must return to where they previously lived. So we're going to go through these situations together. The voter has moved from one ward to another in the same municipality at least 28 consecutive days before an election. The voter would now vote in the new ward. The voter has moved from one municipality to another at least 28 consecutive days before the election. They would vote in their new municipality. The voter has moved from one ward to another in the same municipality less than the 28 consecutive days. The voter would vote in their old ward. The voter has moved from one municipality to another less than 28 consecutive days. They would vote in their old municipality. The voter has moved to a different ward or state temporarily with intent to return in the ward of the municipality from which they have moved. The voter lives in one ward or municipality and conducts business in another. They would vote in the ward or municipality where they live. The voter lives in a public or private facility, such as a federal or state institution, county home or hospital, nursing home, or group home. They would vote in the municipality where the facility is located or in the municipality of residence before entering the facility. If you have uncommon situations or have any concerns, please contact your chief inspector. They're going to have the most training and be able to help you with any situation. Other important notes. An important reminder is that voters cannot be required to wear a face covering in order to vote. There is a document lower on your election training page called Face Coverings, where you can find more information on this by the Wisconsin Election Commission. Remember, absentee ballots cannot be accepted at the polling place. If a ballot is walked in, please contact your chief inspector. There are no registered write-ins as of February 5th. And end of the day ballot bagging. You must look through the ballots for write-ins, but you do not need to separate them by ward. And please review your polling place emergency response plan before election day. This also is a document located on your election training page. Please make sure that you watch and review all additional documents and training materials. We thank you for watching today's presentation.